This likely will be the briefest of our talks. I just wanted to include it because it's what the OBE is. Interior to the coarse aspect of the out-of-body experience itself is a capacity to expand our awareness into the subtle realms of perception so that we're aware of the interior reality within ourselves, the reality that's more fundamental than the coarse reality we more normally experience day to day. And so this is important. We're just going to go into awakening to the subtle realms of perception and perhaps a little bit about what these are and practices we ourselves may invoke, or utilize more strongly to keep us keen and alert to the more subtle realms of perception. And so I may at this point go ahead and attach a little graphic here in which I, in every language or in multiple languages, tried to pattern this out for people to see from the coarse aspect to the more subtle realms of perception. We could bring this in first with presence, awareness, mind, breath, body. Okay, body being more coarse and gradually working interior to that into the more subtle realms. Again, here's the language with the elements: ether, air, fire, water, earth. Earth being the more coarse and gradually working interior to that and to the more subtle elements. Again, we'll do this one more time, this time with the brain waves, this time starting with the more coarse, which is the beta brainwave, but then working interior or more fundamental to that into the alphas, thetas, deltas, gammas. Now, our attention here in 3D Earth is more centric or heavily focused, of course, into that beta brainwave bandwidth. Yes, and most people's attention is only here. However, if we can somehow get our attention interior to that beta into the alphas, we'll see there's a reality associated with that as well. And that's where we go when we begin to open into meditation. We begin to enter those alpha brainwave frequencies, and in that is more information. There's a reality to that in addition to what's appearing in the beta bandwidth. Yes. And so this is what we're talking about today, just gradually opening the awareness into the more subtle realms of perception, and perhaps how it is we do that.
Oh, so my first contemplation on this is that I've been a synesthete, although I didn't know that that's a condition or that it had a name, all my life. So for as long as I can remember. So for me, it was the realization that I wasn't in the same kind of reality as other people. And so I worked it backwards.
Yes. And yet you have still had to go through a process of learning to discern the bandwidths or the.
Yeah, and then almost like uncouple, like the attempt was to always uncouple and to try to get away from that thing that I was being told that it wasn't there.
Mm.
So, yeah, sort of like try to steady. So I have my own, obviously, I have my own baseline. Like my beta waves are with some, extra flavor, I guess one can say. So yeah, but the distinguish it as something that was different. That whole like, how do I know that something is different? Originally, it was pointed out by others around me.
Yeah, same with me. I have my own favorite way of getting into the subtle realms because at heart I am a student. So this will always be the case with me. It's, my most desired way of seeing myself is as a student. And so questioning is my preferred way into the subtle realms. So, in terms of practice, when I was very beginning to enter the spiritual path, I would sit in satsang and I would listen to those who knew more than me, or spiritual masters even who knew more than me. And in satsang, the student learns to listen or enter a state of what's called shravana,
Mhm.
which is a deeper, more open kind of listening than what we more normally do. It's listening without applying any of our filters to what we're hearing and allowing that to move us and repattern us in ways that expand. Also, in that satsang, which is basically a question answer session with a spiritual teacher, again, somebody who just knows more than you do at present, who's been on the path for longer. The question is what leads you in. So, for instance, if I were to ask you a question, especially one that you might have to ponder on for a moment, nobody's ever asked you this question before. It's not something you've ever thought about. So you have to ponder on it for a moment. Well, I've just opened the door for you. I've invited you into the subtle realms because in asking you that question that you have to go deeper into yourself to begin seeing a potential answer to, you've entered a more subtle realm of perception.
Yeah, it's like a scan. It's like I experience it as a full body scan and
Mm,
a full, like a field scan. And
hmm.
it usually starts with taking my point of focus in my vision off the speaker.
Yes, and interior to
Yeah,
yourself.
like gazing off, right? Or gazing down or right. It's like this nondescript focus so that I can scan my own field.
And you begin to use your senses, not just your
Mhm.
normal senses, but
Probably less of my visionary, like 3D vision senses.
your extended sense perceptions. Yes, you begin opening those up, learning how to access them. Yes, and you may begin seeing, but you begin seeing with your inner eye. What you're seeing is not external
Mhm.
to
Yeah.
yourself. It's occurring within yourself. Yes, and this is my preferred way to go in to the subtle realms. I can do it from silence as well, but when you start all the way from the outside, when we're here in 3D physical space on the planet in that beta brainwave bandwidth, then if I want to go internal, I just ask myself a question. So, Atma Vichara, self inquiry, the question, who am I, also came very heavily into my own experience. And following that, even meditation upon an object either external to myself or myself, placing my awareness directly on awareness itself and going in that way with the question, who am I? And so these are the ways that, again, I gradually learned how to begin going deeper and deeper into the more subtle realms, and what inevitably led into me being able to make fully conscious shifts into and out of body, into and out of 3D earth space.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
can see that. Yeah, I see it now. I've been contemplating it, and it feels like there's so much. So I'm trying to make it the simplest that I can articulate it.
What were some of your practices? Like, what's some of the things that you, as a synesthete, went through in order to be able to discern the subtle realms or the subtle layers from one another and make the observations that you have in life?
Well, it's sort of the same inquiry, but it was watching other people. So it was a self-posed inquiry and watching what other people were interacting with in the 3D because I was told early on to stop playing with it. Like I think my grandma specifically would notice it,
Mhm.
and then she would say stuff like, "Don't do that to yourself," some sort of like, "Stop doing that to yourself." So she was noticing that I was interacting with things like in the subtle field.
Within yourself, within the subtle.
Yeah, within
That's
myself and that,
fascinating.
right? And so I would, have certain mannerism or things that were happening and, my eyes and I would always like look at things and
So you would look at others in order to see the differential between what you were doing and what they were doing, and you would
yeah,
try to mimic what they were doing
Not try to mimic, just really, really pay attention because I could gauge if they were observing the same thing I was or I wasn't. Because once it was obvious that I was seeing things that others said that they weren't there or they weren't there in that way, then I could bring awareness, sort of like let someone else lead in a room, right?
Mhm.
So I would just look and then I would kind of look at what I was seeing in the field, right, in the room, and then see if they were looking at it. And then I'm like, okay, that's not there for them. So not necessarily mimic. I'm sure there was a mimicking at some point. I wasn't doing it with that intention.
So you never did it to the point where you said, okay, I'm going to try to let go of this thing that's in my field.
Oh,
So
I
I,
always try to let go of it. Yeah, especially at school or yeah, I was always trying to let go of it.
Mhm.
Always
Were
trying
you
to.
ever successful?
Um, Probably the most successful that I was with it was in my teenage years. I feel like at some point I reclaimed it. Like at some point I blurred it out, right? But it's through the blurring out that I brought it back in too. It's such an interesting thing.
It was challenging for me as well to bring myself fully into 3D physical space. It was something I had not done prior to age 50.
Mhm.
And so, like, I didn't even realize I was experiencing in a different way than those who are more solidly within that 3D physical beta brainwave bandwidth were. And so
Yeah.
it took me forever to learn how to discern the two. And I played around with it for a little bit, trying to get myself there. Now, I don't know if I ever really did for more than moments, but it was
Yep.
interesting when I did because in doing so, I was able to more fully cognize the additional detail, the additional information, the additional experience that was in my experience that wasn't in theirs. And I couldn't do that prior to that. And so, yeah, it's a fascinating thing to be able to see, but learning to, whether you're working top down or base to crown, it's important to discern the fields. I think
Mhm.
it's somewhat easier for those who start with one and expand out into another because they very easily, very rapidly see what that additional element is. However, when you come in top to bottom in any way, I came in a particular way and you did in your particular way.
Yeah. It
Then it's all there at the same time, and you have to take something away in order to see the delineation. And
yes.
in order for that to happen, I would have to ask a question. For instance, when I first started going out of body, and others were uh, describing the dream, lucid dream, astral projection, and out of body experience differently. I would have to ask, well, what is a lucid dream like for them? And so in asking that question, I would be given the experience and I would be mind blown every single time, like, whoa, that is so different than the way that I'm experiencing it. And
Yeah. Right.
yeah, and it's in seeing those I mean, it's the differentials that are always going to help us delineate or see in more detail. And it's the detail in which we can see within an experience that leads an experience more deeply into the subtle realms. Again, I'm going to ask you a question that you don't immediately know the answer to, and immediately you're going to have to go within yourself to begin opening that out and patterning it in a way that allows you to speak a potential reply to this. Yes?
And I can tell you like the specific instance when I realized that that could be a shared space the same way that 3D was a shared space
Yes.
because and it was triggered by something, but in my early 20s, very, very early 20s, I, was invited. I was whatever, I was young, I was having a good time.
Yeah, yeah.
I took ecstasy. Was
We're going to bring some effective tools into this. Yeah.
Yeah. But what happened in it, right? So it's like, and again, it was another space where like, this is what you should expect from it. And
Mm,
I was like having so much more than what was told to be expected. And then I did ask the question of the people I was with.
mm.
And there was one instance where there was a shared hallucination. So that's how it was described by like, a third of the people in the room that saw and experienced the same thing, but everybody else was like, you guys are high, and so it's like, yeah, but the why? And that's when I started to ask the question. I was like, wait a minute, we are, but how come we all saw the same exact thing, like with like heightened detail?
Yeah. Yeah, the
And
shared
from different
experiences.
places in the room, right? Yeah.
The shared experiences are fascinating, and I have not had enough of an opportunity with shared experience to investigate and explore it to the point where I could make effective comment. I just haven't, but I do get riveted at the idea. The thing with me is I'm so aware I am in my own reality bubble, that i.e., I am the very first thing I am experiencing, that I realize that I'm not in a shared reality at present. It looks like I am. 3D
Interesting.
airspace looks like a shared
It
reality,
does, right? Yeah.
but prove it when
Hmm.
you are the very first thing you are ever experiencing. You are the reality you are experiencing.
Yes.
Your life is a story that's going on around that, but the experience is fundamentally I, right? And so I must be in a personal private space at present. See, this is where my mind goes. And in
Yeah.
order to get out beyond that, I have to exceed the 3D Earth space to get there. Like I think that, and the way that I pattern my whole structure, the galactic reality, dimension six,
Okay.
5, and
Yeah.
4D are the true consensus space, is the true shared territory. It's like from that space, we decide to encapsulate ourselves within a planetary band. And yeah, we're not in a shared reality quite yet. We may be. I mean, there may be other souls around experiencing the Earth life story
Yes.
at the same time and place that I am, but
Mhm.
prove it. You can't from from our little personal reality bubble. I mean, because what we're experiencing is everything inside of that, inside of our own self. The story that's projecting, the things that happen over the course of the lifetime are based on our own thoughts and energies and tendencies and behaviors. We're drawing that to us within that scope, and we haven't exceeded that scope yet. I started seeing this more when I started going out of body on that daily basis for that 4 year period of time, because my field now seemed to be expanding out beyond what I was more normally experiencing. And so,
Mhm.
like, if I reached out to touch the plant, I could feel the plant
Yes.
far before I ever physically got to its physical components. And so, like, my experience space seemed to expand, and it now seemed to be overlapping with discrete things, people, even places. Like I could connect with California. I mean, it was an actual experience within myself, tangible, tactile, in
Mhm.
every way, you know. And so that's what began to help me see that I was expanding from a personal, private, or solo experience, in which it may very well seemed that there were others around, into something that was more consensual, because there was that overlap of that feelable, tangible presence of myself and that other. And the experience of it in this way is very different than going through space, where there seems to be space between the one thing and another thing. Yeah, that space started going away, and that started bringing me in again to the more subtle realms of perception that are more fundamental, that are interior to and more fundamental to this one that we more commonly experience. Phenomenal experience. I mean, you can prove it to yourself. It's not a mind game or a guessing game. It's an actual experience. It's an alteration in the way that I experience myself, and an alteration in which I experience myself in relation to that idea of another, whether that another was the plant or my dog or the room I happened to be in. Uh, it was all the same. Everything was an experience within itself that I could overlap with and experience through my interior
Mhm.
self. Yeah, in a phenomenal way. in yeah, an absolutely phenomenal way.
I feel like I was spending a lot more time and a lot more effort trying to keep that blurring at bay
Yeah.
because it's not seen as appropriate and because what I call, first of all, I'm endlessly fascinated by other people's constructs. Like I am, like I want to go look into this thing and I want to know what's going on here and I'm fascinated by that. Like I ask a lot of questions. I can sit and mull that over constantly, that
Mhm.
space. But groups can create the blurring effects for me very easily. As a teacher, I could easily feel other people's fields in the room be much more open. And then I felt like, I often felt like I was being drowned. I felt drowned by other people's fields.
Hmm. Well, yeah.
That like the blurriness that was occurring for me was not just fascinating, now it was imposing. Like I didn't know how to boundary enough so that I can distinguish between, personal experience and shared space.
Mhm. I think in my case, I was expanding out and experiencing and overlapping with the more subtle realm of that thing that I was, so for instance, with the plant.
Mhm.
So I was interacting with the interiorness of it and not the exteriorness of it. And so for me it was more pleasant, but I did note that when I did this with people, I wrote many logs on my website about this. When I did it with people, it was different. And so I can very much understand, like I
Mhm.
was not able to keep it to just the interiorness of that
Mhm.
one, meaning the soul level aspect of that one, perhaps, or the energetic. The interior energetic, not the exterior energetic, in which somebody may be frenzied in their thinking and all of that. But I could not keep it to the interiorness. That exteriorness would creep in. And yes, I very much noticed it was different. And so my preference when this was happening, it's not like this had never happened before, but it might happen in meditation. It definitely didn't happen much in life when I was engaging out there in the world. Uh, but in meditation, in yoga practice, in any kind of get together I had with other spiritual people who were more accustomed to living from the withinness of themselves, it of course was much easier and different than when I'm overlapping fields in a very experiential way, with others who are not in that space. Yeah. So yeah, I get you. I get you. Did you work on that?
I did at some point worked on it. Yeah, for a while it did feel like I had some sort of like unspoken superpower whenever I needed. I
Yeah.
think this is where I might have blurred the lines between not just between my boundaries, but their boundaries. Like I wasn't necessarily at all times respectful of other people's boundaries either.
Yeah. Well, you're not actually entering them.
I couldn't make the difference, right? I could not distinguish a difference. It felt as if it was.
It's almost like your clair senses come online at this point, and
Well,
your feelers reach out to an extent that it gives you information, such as here's how it would happen with me. When I would do this, when I was engaged in speaking with another person, let's say, I could feel their physical collective stress pattern from within my own body. And then as I was talking to them, I could sequentially relax that stress pattern through my own body
yeah,
and visibly watch them become more relaxed as they were
yeah.
speaking with me. Yes, and this pattern out to where when I was comfortable enough with the person and they were comfortable enough with me, I could get feedback on that. And I would tell them where in their body they were stressing the most. It was usually three places in a pattern, but then there'd be other stress patterns sequentially around that. But I would verbally say, this is where I'm feeling the stress in your body. And then they would intentionally relax there and notice, yes, I was stressed there.
Yeah.
And so I got really good feedback on that as well.
Well, you got really good feedback on it, and I had to learn to the point where somebody told me some few years ago that this is what a medical intuitive would is, and I was like, oh, okay. I've been doing this forever to the point where my closer girlfriends, right, they would be like, one has a limp, and I said, what's going on? And she's like, I don't want to tell you because you're gonna feel it. But I would take it on. Like in order to feel into it, like I would take it on. Like my best friend told me about her leg issue after working out. And for 24 hours after getting off the phone with her, I started limping and I was like, what in God's name? And then as soon as I tuned in what it was, I told her what it was like a day or so later, and then it moved out.
Yeah, you have to clear the anterior field.
Yes, see, I didn't know how to do that. And I was like, no, thank you. That's why I felt like there were boundary issues. I didn't know how to boundary. I didn't know what was happening. I just knew that I could take that on to the point where I remember I was walking one time with a friend of mine at the park, and these two gentlemen came up and they wanted to pray on us. And
Mm.
they were quite lovely and can we pray for you? Can we put hands on you? And I
Oh.
responded so like my reaction was like hell to the F no. I was like, thank you so much. Keep praying and no. And my friend's like, well, that was a little aggressive. And I was like, absolutely not. Like no hands on me. But my reaction was that way because of the blurriness that I felt in the field that I couldn't control. I couldn't stay within myself.
Hmm.
And so you know,
Yeah, I don't blame you for making the choice there that you did, and I would have made a very similar one as well, because I don't want other people's sense perceptions and patterns to invoke something over myself by agreeing to let them do that to me. So, like,
I mean, that didn't even
generally wouldn't do.
at the time, none of that occurred. Today, I would make the same exact choice for completely different reasons, right? But at the time, I was like, oh no, like we're, I don't need to feel anything in your field, you know?
Mhm.
Thank you very much. Like, no.
Okay. All right. Well, let's go on to the next thing. So I mentioned that one of my favorite ways to go into the spiritual realms of perception is was through study, Atma-vichara, self-inquiry, questioning. But another favorite way was through vision, because my vision had always rather been expanded. I had this what I call extended range of vision. And as a child, perhaps it was the most expanded. Uh, However, now it's coming into a level where I'm able to actually conceptualize delineations and differentials and things like this. And so it's more full now than it was before. But I would enter through the practice of Tritak, for instance. And it's something that I began practicing not on purpose. It's something that I intuitively just always did. I was raised in Las Vegas in the 1960s. Nothing there in the 1960s. Okay, just a big desert, nothing to do for kids, right? So, you spend a lot of time alone, and often a lot of time alone out in the desert. And so, you go out there and you sit and you play, you have your little play, but you're playing again from the withinness of yourself, creating, things and stories and little games and, whatnot. And so you're already in these realms, but in
Yeah.
them, you may just sit, and you would sit and maybe zone off in a particular direction. And or the light would catch the sunlight would catch something metallic. This is
Mm.
how it began happening with me. The sunlight would catch something metallic and the light would boom, off of the metallic item, and I would just get transfixed. And that was my point, my observation point. And I would just get so attracted to the light that I couldn't tear my attention away. And I noticed that my vision began going deeper into the visual components of the light itself. So I would go into the light, and then, like I did with candles later on, you begin to see this radiance from around it, these streams of light extending off it, these many moving points of light moving simultaneously in and out from the center of the light. And you just rather go deeper and deeper into the more subtle and more fundamental components. The light itself is the more subtle that it's going to go in terms of visuals. However, you could go, even more into light itself, into its more subtle components until you arrive at what we might call the nothingness or presence itself, utterly non-visual. I'll just say on top of that, to talk at a certain point becomes drishti.
Mhm.
Okay, or true inner vision.
Mhm.
And this is what begins expanding us out into the more coarse fields, we could say, like out of the 3D physical experience I was having here on the planet into an OBE, into the etheric frequency bandwidth of right there where I was. Now, back then, I didn't cognize that this was happening. I didn't cognize the difference between the etheric frequency bandwidth, which looks just like the 3D physical frequency bandwidth. However, there might be a little entity there, or there might be something else there that was engaging with me. But again, I wasn't able to discern the two when I was a child. I now can, which makes it much more full.
Um, I'm curious about this because of what it was for me. Do you feel like you were cognizing or seeing an entity before you saw geometry? Like light geometry? Because sound and light are so connected for me that sound can take me into visual disturbance or shift, and then vision can take me into sound disturbance,
It
right?
depends on how I travel. So
Yeah.
I can travel from void first, then point of light, star filled, blueprint grid, aerial level view, ground level view, and go through the layers that way. But when I was a kid, no, it was just seamless. It was like a seamless shift from like a classical OBE, a seamless shift from 3D physical planetary space into the etheric frequency bandwidth, which again looks just like here. You're in the etheric frequency bandwidth of Earth space, so you're still right there where you are. However, you're on a slightly different radio frequency bandwidth of it, and there are things there that aren't in the 3D physical frequency bandwidth. And there's also your less distance between yourself and other visual objects within the field. At that point, your field has expanded and it's begun to overlap with those other visual components that are in the field. And so the experience of it is quite different.
The overlap is the operative word. The overlap.
There
I
just
was
begins to be less and less space between. Yeah.
um check, check, and check. I have every single one of those is exactly the same, right? And then I remember trying to explain that to myself as, oh, this is what being psychic is, and then like not really knowing how to distinguish between what is mediumship and what is being psychic, because like where's the information? Like people have very different, from me trying to seek an explanation, but having very different definitions of what one or the other is. But yeah, the visual field is so. I have this right now. In Oregon, we're like today we're having the haze from the fires, and it's intense. And I'm like, oh, there it is. It's cellophane over everything,
Mhm.
and so then like the part that I call the firmament, how you can see like the field that is holding everything in the 3D, it's blurred, and so it's a pretty surreal experience for a lot of people. For me, it's like, ooh, it came on really fast.
Yeah, yeah. We might also say, I mean, just to give people another idea of ways in, just because you and I are both or have been both yoga practitioners, that this is what yoga or Raja yoga or eight-limbed yoga is also depicting. You know, those eight limbs starting at the yamas and niyamas.
Mhm.
Okay, beneficial actions and behaviors and tendencies and working with that. You know, expand out into asana where you're working more with the body, which expand out into pranayama where you're now working with the breath and the body and all of those tendencies, which expand out, of course, through the layers into pratyahara,
Yeah, right.
jhana, dharana, and samadhi, which are basically taking you into the from contemplative into a meditative state,
Hmm.
you know, and beyond. So you're sequentially, the eight-limb yoga is outlining a sequential pattern or process through which you start with what's more coarse and you sequentially work inward into what is more interior or more fundamental to
Always.
that. And so
Yeah.
it's just showing, moving through that whole process is the same thing. It's just a guiding into an awareness and an awakening of the awareness into the more subtle realms of perception of
And
self.
yeah, and it is driving inside the self because that's what drishti at this point, that's what drishti is for me. It's even picking a point of focus on the outside, right? Like I think that I'm picking a point of focus into the 3D, like in the room. But what it
Mhm.
actually does is that, like, is through the visual field going straight inner. It's not
Mhm.
about what I'm, just focus to like bring it in. Yeah.
So one of the yamas in the yamas is brahmacharya. This is the my last choice for my what have been my preferential ways to go in. And for the viewers and listeners who
Yeah.
are not aware, brahmacharya is just generally accepted as the idea of celibacy. And so the way in which I just got intrigued at this because I highly suspected that I was a brahmacharin, a very natural brahmacharin. You
Mhm.
know, again, most people in 3D space engage through the front body with other bodies. However, at a certain point in our graduation through the 3D classroom, after lifetimes, generally, many hundreds, sometimes thousands, a person gets to the point or a consciousness gets to the point where the back body is entirely open. And that connection with spirit, which is what the back body connects us with, is fully in place. So you never feel alone. You never feel lacking. This is my life. I never felt alone. I never felt lacking. I didn't feel anything missing, especially when it came to myself as a male or female or as a sexual being.
Mhm.
Okay, that was completely absent. I was completely getting everything I needed. And so at a certain point, I played around with the idea of brahmacharya and found that I just was a natural brahmacharin. And that was because of the reason that I just said. Now, the reason this took me into the more subtle realms is because the general description or definition of brahmacharya as celibacy was laughable to me. I'm like, oh no, I'm constantly engaged, constantly euphoric, or what you might call orgasmic,
Mhm.
interiorly happy and energetically fueled at all times. I don't, it's that's not missing from my experience. And so whether you engage through the front body with other bodies or whether you train yourself to open that back body and experience that connection with spirit that does the same thing, if not more, and on a constant, sustainable, regular basis rather than periodically here and there, you know, out in the field, it's the same. I'm like, I'm not celibate. And it started being humorous. I mean, I was celibate in the sense of what most people would think, meaning I'm not engaging through the front body, but I'm not in the sense that I am constantly enraptured with spirit. And therefore, the definition didn't make much sense. These are the observations I began
Mhm.
having. Because I would ask myself, why does it not make sense to me? And then I could see that back body was open. That engagement was always in place. It just wasn't through the front body. So, yeah, it sequentially took me into the more subtle realms of perception where I began awakening to what more was there and detail within that. Uh, and I can go into as much detail as I want if that's where I focus my attention. And so this is just another way in. And regardless of what your way in, there are many ways in.
Mhm.
You can engage the front body with other bodies and go in too. It's just that most people don't. They're working with need and desire and even
Yes.
greed
The
and
what's feeding. Yeah.
the deadly sins.
Yeah.
Yes. And so they haven't gotten to the point, perhaps. Some people have, of course, who work for it, who understand there are more subtle realms and the potentiality that exists within the male female components coming together.
Mhm.
That is the awakening of the Kundalini and that whole process. However, yeah, not many are engaging in that direction, right? The vast majority are engaging in a whole nother direction. And
Yeah, it's not a cooperative engagement in general, I would say. But there, that doesn't mean that it isn't always,
yeah,
because I've seen it both ways and in dabbling to that, right? I always understood the brahmachari more of a not celibacy, but chastity, as in like clean and very wise and very intentional.
in a very hardcore practical sense, it's celibacy. You're not going to have sex with another person and
I get that.
deliberately.
Yeah. Mhm.
And but when I looked into it in itself, when I looked into brahmacharya in itself, is it this? No. Once the back body is open, once that
Yeah.
connection with spirit is there, once you are fully aware of and experiencing it again on its regular, steady, sustainable daily basis, then yeah, no, it's not that. And you can continue to take your awareness into the more subtle and more subtle and more subtle fundamental basis of what that is. And it's an enjoyable thing to experience beyond anything I could ever tell anybody. Not many will take their attention this way. And that's why I ask, because I like the differentials between the ways I like to go in and the ways other people like to go in as well. And so I would ask again, uh, can you bring to the front of your attention the ways in which you and your life have chosen or have preferred and engaged a shifting of your attention inwardly into the interiorness or more fundamental aspects of yourself?
I mean, in relation to the brahmachari experience, I would say that even for someone that is engaging in the front body in that relationship,
I want you to go into your plant medicine. So I know that you've enjoyed engaging that idea of medicinal plant
oh yeah,
medicine as a way to go in. And so
yeah,
tell us about that.
there's a preparation for that,
Mhm.
right? Because it's not just a way to go in, it's a way to go all in or as full in as, so there's that. I would say music, though, is probably my favorite way to go in.
Awesome sound.
Yeah. So like I wear headphones a lot. I wear over the ear headphones because they're noise canceling because it has a different different it, it has to do with my synesthesia. The first time I ever put on noise canceling over the ear headphones, I actually cried. Like my environment had never been I've never felt my 3D environment be this calm. There's always it's a very busy sensory environment, right?
Mhm.
So it is a focus, right? The headphones on music and preferred music, it's a focus. So my preferred way would be music to just sit with myself and go into the music, into the sounds, into the rhythm, into explore that.
And to what
That's
you're
how I go in.
experiencing yourself within those sounds. And you did mention how you would notice the calm at first, but were there
Mhm.
other
No.
aspects of yourself that brought you into, and what were those?
Yeah. The calm, the body, the nervous system, so the physical me aspect, but also then the colors and the geometry, the light geometry, and then the worlds, right? Like here with more information in a different world, in a different place, in the right, like very etheric, very even probably interacting with like more etheric beings or from in a different frequency band, as you would say,
Mhm.
right? So that is music, I think, would be the easiest way. But I will say that it's not just the ceremony music that does that. I've actually noticed that sometimes the easiest way for me to go in is through some really nice, good hard beats. Like I have a playlist that is called Viking War Drums, and like I love that playlist. you know, drumming and really hard drumming. It's like it's exhilarating, and then that's an entry point. As
Mhm.
far as the medicines, I actually felt called today in the preparation for it today to sit with hape, which is a tobacco snuff mix. And I experience it as a clarifying meditative medicine. It's
Mhm.
not a hallucinogenic, right? But it is a grounding,
Yeah.
expansive medicine. So that is something that it's not that I like it, it's that I like what it does.
What does it do?
It feels sensory expanding,
Mhm.
clarifying, opening. It feels focusing. Like it can be very grounding
So it brings you into yourself where
into
you think
myself,
that
but like in an expansive way. Like, all my I can breathe, there's a fullness.
anytime we come into ourself, we come into a more expanded state than we are when our attention is addressed exterior to ourself. When we bring the attention into ourself and feel our own felt presence, that's immediately expansive. And of course, then we can go into the more subtle and subtle realms of that as we choose.
When it has to do with the intention, like hape is known as a medicine where it's not the dose that is, contributing to the experience, it's the size and the content of the prayer. So because I use it in a contemplative, meditative, grounding, opening space, then that's usually the experience I've had. Now, I've gotten rocked by it before where without being intentional in it, then like that was not pleasant
Yeah.
and it'll get your attention, right? So there's other medicines that I prefer that, to employ them.
Mm.
Um, tea, having a hot tea,
Mm.
like you're, I don't know if that's what you're drinking right now, but yeah, tea. And I have a favorite tea. There's certain scents that can put me in that space of expanding.
Mhm.
Just stillness for me, coming into stillness, paying attention to my breath, of course. Like,
There are so many ways, right? The ways are endless.
right, like at this point is really, really easy. And just stillness and quiet. And in fact, my granddaughters were asking, how come they can't see the fairies? And I said, well, because you guys are not sitting still and you're being really loud. So, so then we were under the tree with the meditative pillows, out there. I'm like, nope, you need to, might want to sit a little longer. So it's fun, right? Like just being with the nature around me in that space a lot. It's so easy to drop in. It honestly is so easy.
And for those who have a more challenging time, or this is really big, a lot of people say that I'm not visual. If I close my eyes, I can't see anything.
Mm,
But you said something important. It takes time. And so the important thing is to, when you're going to sit in a meditation, for instance, to do so for a length of time in which something can actually take place. Like, don't
yeah.
get frustrated and get up for it before you've made an observation,
Mhm.
even if that observation is that I'm not seeing anything.
Mhm.
Note that observation and keep observing and keep noting your observations. And over time, you'll be able to test your observations. For instance, ask the question, if you write the sentence, I could not see anything, then you ask yourself, is that true?
Mm.
Because
Yeah.
if I point out to somebody what they're seeing, they're like, oh, yeah, of course, that's there. And I'm like, well, why didn't you count that in what you were seeing? And until you cognize that you are seeing it, it will seem like you're not seeing anything when you are. So the experience is always there. It's your own ability to cognize that experience and the visuals it contains, or what other sensory kind of experiences it contains, uh, for that to happen. And so, of course, the first thing that you see when you close your eyes is dark, black. You're seeing it. It's there. It's visually there. But people won't even realize that until I point it out. But that's
Can,
not anything. But yes, it is. In fact, it's everything. It's everything all at once. And now, as your brainwave begin to shift, the everything all at once
uh,
starts to parse apart. Yeah, into something specific or something in more detail. Again, and it's that detail
yeah.
that gradually grows us into, slipping deeper and deeper into the more subtle realms. If I encourage you to continue to bring me more detail, I again open the door and invite you into the more
Mhm.
subtle realm, to what the one that you're now experiencing. And so always say yes to that open door, that invitation in, and go in and get something. Now, again, it might take you a moment, to get there. And often people, when they're going in at first, don't use their visual component because
Mhm.
they have the sentence and their pattern of thought that says, when I close my eyes, I can't see anything, right? And so that sentence is what's getting in their way. So often you'll begin to use your other senses to detect what's there. And one thing that you can detect is the sense of your preference. Like, do I tend to feel a flower before I can see it? Or do I tend to smell a flower before I see it? And so you can see, and you keep going in and you keep making observations. And then again, what you're seeing is yourself and your own preferences, the reasons for those preferences, et cetera, et cetera.
But can we talk about this really quick? Two things, please. So, do you notice that there's darkness? This is for other people, right? When you're trying to focus a camera and let's say it's not focused or it feels like something is too close, it's like the darkness feels like it's right up against I think you call it that you're like right up against the wall, then you're not
Right
seeing
up
it,
against the
right?
wall.
And it's like, but if you right up against the wall and you like refocus your vision on that, then it'll just do this,
Mhm.
right? And so test that, like play with that. First of all, consistency. Like do try, like drop again into it for like another 5 minutes, another 10 minutes throughout the day, right? Like be consistent and just as much as you can and like focus on that thing that is you're right up against and see if the camera can do that, right? Like expand it.
Sure.
That's one. And two, the clears, I want to talk about this personally because this idea that like someone that is clairvoyant, and I'm very clairvoyant, right? Like it's my dominant clair. Can't do it. Eyes closed, that like it's never quiet, right? But the clears work together. So a lot of times when we say, are you clear sentient? Like, do you sense the flower? Do you know you clear audience? Do you feel that, right? All the sense organs reflect or convey what has been detected.
Mhm.
Eventually, they communicate through each other into vision. So,
Yeah,
like, someone may say, I'm not clairvoyant and I can't see it. It's like, no, no, but you will get a mental picture of that which you're sensing and smelling and hearing.
at a certain point. At first, the
Exactly.
pattern,
From the consistency, it
the
will eventually move into it.
all of the senses exist at the same time.
Mhm.
However, we do have tendencies, behaviors, preferences, sentences that get in the way, and all of this other kind of stuff. So when a beginner is going in, a lot of beginners, when they go in, have like a 90% usage of their tactile or feelable sense. So they can feel it, like they can feel that they're tired, but not see the thing they're doing that's making it so, you know.
Yeah.
Okay. And so, yeah, it depends on, their pattern, how
Mhm.
strong. Okay. I'm using feeling to 50%. I'm using sight to 3%. I'm using smell to 2%. And that there'll be a pattern in there. Like it's not balanced or harmonious yet, where they're all being utilized at 100%.
Mhm.
That takes time to get there. And yes, the consistency in the daily practice and giving yourself enough time for a change to take place that you can actually observe and make note of is another
Mhm.
thing. And this is the gift we often don't give ourselves. But if and when we do begin, then these are the ways in which it begins to pattern out. We tend to get good at what we do a lot, right? We generally
Yes.
suck at something the very first times we're doing it, or the things that we don't do very often. We're going to be, not very good at that kind of a thing. However, with consistency and with giving yourself enough time, yes, the practice begins yielding.
And then they become all the clears, in my opinion, right? And all the clears actually become clear cognizance. Like you just know.
Yeah, I think that claircognizance, well, the way that I would define that is all the clear senses all at once. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
They're just, like, no, you're not trying to split them. You can use any of them. They're all gonna work with each other and together, right?
Being able to discern one from another, I think is highly important. Otherwise, we don't have the words to describe or help our own self see the detail within that we need
Right.
to in order to continue our
I
learning
will tell
process.
you something that happens in medicine, and this is probably a known thing for people that have sat with psilocybin specifically. It isn't a recommendation with ayahuasca. Like, in fact, in ayahuasca, it's like in psilocybin too, but with ayahuasca specifically, they're like, do not look at yourself in the mirror when you're at the medicines. No, no. But in psilocybin, there's instruction like that, like, hey, don't get stuck if you're going to the bathroom, don't get stuck in front of the reflective surfaces because you can get really tripped out, let's say, right? Because what you think of almost immediately manifests in your visual field.
Yeah, there's no
So
break.
there's no separation between, like, I'm thinking of a lion and suddenly you're just this lion with this mane and you're like, wow, right? So if you know what you're doing and if you're, but that's one of the prompts that, like, be careful with reflective surfaces because anything that you're thinking becomes your visual field, and then the biofeedback of, like, how are you going to sit with that in
Mhm.
medicine.
And are you able to, do you have the composure to continue taking your attention more deeply into the more subtle realms of perception behind all of this
Yeah,
as you go in? And so
yeah,
this was great. One more time, I'm going to put up a visual which goes into various of the languages in which we patterned from the more coarse into the more subtle realms. So again, you can get an idea for what these are. One of the ones that a lot of people will keen to is the religious pattern, which is God, Father, Son, Holy Spirit, man, right? Man being the more coarse and gradually sequentially going into the more subtle, more fundamental components of that. And so again, there's many ways to take yourself in through light itself, through sound itself, or the many patterns of these, such as visuals or music or certain sounds, to the various practices that you may, for instance, such as myself as a student, enjoying questioning and asking myself questions and going in for what the answer might be.